All right, welcome everyone to our AU Core Technical Design Group. The first one and wow, that says the 7th of September. That's quite future planning of us. It's the 7th of August. I'll correct that later and update the slides. I'd like to start with acknowledgement of country and that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all gather today. And for me, that's the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And we acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. Today is going to be a little bit less of an action-packed day than we've been having. One of the things we're really running through today, because we just finished really all the work we've been doing on the second release of AU Core. We've published a snapshot to go out for Ballot now. So we're running through really some of the administrative side of things in approval of minutes and our charter. We'll go through a bit of an update on where is everyone at in terms of what are our numbers for Ballot sign-ups, what's the timeframes look like. And then I'll go through a bit of a Ballot 101. I think we'll probably finish earlier today. And it's really from the next meetings onwards that we'll start getting the feedback from the community and having a look at that and starting to do some ballot reconciliation. So that's sort of our agenda today. Is there anything else that people want to add on to this agenda? All right. I'm not hearing anyone, but pop your hand up at any time. Let's go through the usual business. So first up is approval of minutes. Now, there are actually two sets of minutes to approve. We postponed the last set because they only came out for community review like the day before we held the meeting. So we still need to do the 10th of July. And then we also need to do the 24th, which is our last meeting. So I'm going to go to that first one first, and we'll do these separately. So I feel like I clicked. Thinking about it. There we go. So this is not our last meeting, but the one before that. So again, these have now been sent out for review. All the feedback's been addressed. We've got our attendees. We've got, our usual requirements around the recording, the slides. We've got the transcript. We've got the chat log. We've got the detailed minutes about the decisions that were made, any of the updates that are in here. Does anyone need any more time or any other feedback to this before we move to approve them? Just run to the end. All right, I'm not hearing any. So I'm happy to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the 10th of July. Who would like to motion?
I'm happy to motion that. Thanks, Danielle. Rosemary Villado.
Thanks, Rosemary. Who would like to second? If you're unsure if you were there, I can bring up.
Second, Danielle. It's Michael
Thanks, Michael. All right, I will now put up the poll. Let me just find that. All right, you should see in front of you the approval of minutes of previous meeting. If you can't vote, please put your vote in the chat, like +1 affirmative or +1 abstain or whatever that is. If you can't see that and you don't have an option for that because you've dialed in, please just say your name and whether your vote is affirmative, negative, or abstain. We're still looking for quite a few more people to vote.
Danielle, this is for the 10th of July, this one?
It is, yeah, that's
okay,
right.
Thank you.
And I'll just go to the attendees list here so you can see whether or not you were there. All right, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and share the results. I'll just double check in the chat if there is a vote. Okay, we do have one. So with the results in the chat, we have 11 affirmative, 0 negative, 11 abstain. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. So let's do the other set of minutes then. Coming back to this, so we also had the minutes of just our last meeting that we went through, which was prior to the ballot release, and we went through like the quality assurance report, the QA.html of the IG, and I'll just run through those. So this is who attended. We have no slides attached. Can we just note an action, please, for me to attach the slides to the 24th of July minutes, and I'll do that. We do have the transcript and chat log, and then we have some detailed minutes on what was walked through and what our discussion was, which was really about the scope of AU Core Ballot R2, and then also running through what as I said, the QA.html looked like. Does anyone need more time to review these before we look to approve them? So noting that I will attach the slides that were presented at the last meeting, is anyone happy to make a motion to approve our last set of minutes, which is the 24th of July?
Sure, Dad McKillop.
Thanks, David. Is anyone happy to second that?
Michael Osborne.
Thanks, Michael. I will now relaunch that poll. You should see in front of you again a poll to approve the minutes of, and this is the last meeting. All right, we're at about 70% of people have voted, so just a few more to vote affirmative, negative, or abstain, or put their vote in the chat. All right, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end that poll. So including the numbers in the chat, we have a total of 13 affirmative, 0 negative, and 12 abstain. So the motion carries, that passes. I'm also just going to take a moment here to do a check-in for people who have joined us in the last few months. What I'm sharing for you, you'll see percentages, but you won't see the individual numbers of voters, whereas the chair or the host of the meeting actually gets to see the individual numbers. So I'm reading those out for our minute taker so that we can capture the correct numbers in the minutes. They're also logged within Zoom. So if we're unsure if I got read out the numbers correct, or we need to double check, we can go back and look at those at any time. All right, so let's move on to the next one. Let me get back to our slides. Okay, next report back. So we had a vote out that was proposing that we defer a number of items. The items, just clicking on that, that were proposed are really those that were open in the AU Core backlog, and that the AU Core co-chairs had assessed as being things that were not able to be completed now in AU Core R2 because we'd come to the end of development, and that any of these items needed a full release. So that's things like entirely new profiles. It's things like, in this particular case, which is requesting that we convert the narrative representation of our search requirements. So things like saying, oh, you should support patient.identifier as like a HPII, into a set of FHIR artifacts like profiles on search parameters, which I think is a good idea, but we're past that point in R2 now in terms of development work. So that was put out and that was voted on, and that has passed with 11 affirmative, 0 negative or abstain, and none of the items were referred to telecom. So those items are now considered deferred. And deferred just means not in this release. It doesn't mean never. We will, when we do an R3 prioritization for AU Core, go back and look at the entire set of the backlog, both open tickets and anything that has been deferred. Any questions about that e-vote? Let me just check the participants. All right then. Over to you, Marvin, on feedback on the AU Core TDG Charter. Did you want me to stop sharing so that you can share?
No, in fact, if you just click on that link that I've got in there, that's probably all good.
All right.
So we have gone through every year, we go through the just validating our mission, our charter, just making sure that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing, I guess. So we requested people to have a look and make some comments if they think things needed changing or not. So we had no updates on that. So there was some commentary around the use of the word seamless. I like the Oxford, the Cambridge Dictionary version. It says seamless is happening without sudden changes, interruption, and difficulty, which I think is what we're trying to achieve. So I'm kind of comfortable with the use of that still. If you scroll up to the top, Danielle.
The entire top of the page or top of the comments?
Top of the page. So our mission, as kind of reads out, is really to precisely articulate the requirements and specifications necessary to promote seamless interoperability among clinical and non-clinical systems within the Australian context. And I think that's what we're trying to do. The charter just identifies how we operate and how we work. The work products, if you can scroll down just slightly, the work products is really to develop and maintain the AU Core Implementation Guide and the AU Patient Summary Implementation Guide, which I think is what we're doing at the moment. So I'm comfortable that we haven't had any changes to that, and nobody has proposed any changes that should happen to that. So I'm guessing we can. Do we need to vote whether we keep this the same, Danielle, or do we just say that's good to go? We will revisit it next year and see if there are any changes that need to be made.
I think, okay. So in terms of a point of order, and this page has existed for a while. So what you've been walking through is that some of this feedback was addressed in the previous version of the charter, and then approved. And then there is a new release of the charter, and that's been open for 12 months for people to identify any additional feedback. There has only been really the comment on seamless, and you've addressed that. So I think the question here is, are there any objections or any noted requests for change that people on the line would like to make to our charter, or can we ratify continuing to operate under this charter for the next 12 months? I'm just leaving that open for people to put their hand up if there's anything that they would like to note should be addressed. All right, hearing nothing, then by the HL7 international process of general consensus, we can consider that ratified. I think it's probably worth at this point looking at somehow closing those comments, or maybe starting a new page so that we can clearly distinguish between I think comments that have already been addressed, and new comments.
Yeah.
We might take an action to investigate that, but otherwise, I think we've ratified it.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks, everyone. Right. In terms of updates, just another reminder, if you would like to attend the Connectathon on the 1st to the 2nd of September and you don't have tickets, please email events@hl7.com.au. There is a wait list. And one of the other things we're asking is that if you do have tickets, but you're unable to attend, even if that's the day before, please email events@hl7.com.au so they can release the tickets. There are some people who absolutely could turn up to the event, even given less than 24 hours notice. So it's still, I think, a really active discussion. The Brisbane Connectathon seems quite hot for attendance. So I'm kind of excited to go there and see how it all works out. Righto, ballot update. Let's talk through it. So for the AU Core Technical Design Group, and I'm going to take an overall view here because a lot of what we've been doing has been talking about the AU Core Fire IG. And that was our first project in this technical design group, but it's not our only project. We're actually responsible for 2, and there might be more projects in future that we look after. That's actually as per our charter that says that we are really looking after that core digital health and administrative data exchange within Australia. And that could very easily extend to a whole number of other specifications and other projects in the future. At the moment, the TDG is looking after 2 items. So we've got the AU Core Fire IG and we've got the AU Patient Summary Fire IG. And both of those are going for ballot in this particular cycle. So I'm just going to give a quick summary of both of those, and then I'll spend a bit more time on AU Core because that is typically the focus of these calls. So we've got the 2 ballot snapshots, as in these are the completed, ready for release, proposed working standard versions. So AU Core 2.0.0, and that's the proposed version for AU Core, is out there. This is going for working standard. I'm just going to bring this up now. There's a couple of points that are worth noting on this. We did talk about it in our last call, but I'm just going to highlight what that looks like. So in general, here's what a ballot snapshot looks like. There's always a note to talk about, when the time frame is, how do you see what the changes are, and links off to information about how to actually participate in ballot. One of the things that we agreed to do, though, that came out of the last meeting is that there are 2 changes that are coming into AU Core that have not been applied yet, which were around the NCTS terminology. So there's a couple of notes to balloters. There's one in the changelog to call out that these 2 changes aren't yet applied. But there's also on each of the profiles a bit more of a detailed note to give balloters enough information on what the change would be, even though they can't see it now. So that's one of the things I just wanted to call out for people that is a little bit special about this ballot publication. Obviously, these notes will disappear by the time that we actually do a real publication for AU Core. This is simply here to ensure that the balloting process and the people who are making the votes and balloting and providing feedback have, I guess, the best information to work from. So just wanted to call that out. And there's a similar case in patient summary. Patient summary is a little bit different in a couple of ways. One, AU patient summary depends on the IPS, which is moving to 2.0.0, and there's a whole number of changes coming into there. And one of the things about that is that its changes are currently in its CI build as its continuous integration build. There isn't a version snapshot that is showing the in progress changes. It's a bit of a difference, I think, between some of the international projects and what we do in Australia. We do really frequent version snapshots that then go into the NPM register and then can be loaded on servers and are like permalinked to a whole bunch of stuff. But in HL7 International, they tend to only really release ballot and final versions. So all the work that's being done in IPS 200 is sitting in an unversioned release. So we depend on that for patient summary. One of the side effects of that is that the HL7 FHIR package registry, which is what servers use in order to go get the known dependency and go and pull it down and load it, it's unable to load NPM packages for things that depend on CI builds. So for the moment, for patient summary, you won't actually see a package registered in the FHIR NPM registry. You will do that for AU Core and e-requesting and AU Base. They're all there, but patient summary isn't, and that's why. So it's of a special relevance to call out that. The other thing I want to note here as we're coming through is because it depends on the continuous integration build and work is still ongoing. And in fact, there's a vote tomorrow to make some significant normative changes to IPS 200. This ballot version is, I'm going to say, seem out of sync in some ways with IPS 200. So we've got a few notes in places around where we are expecting those changes to come through and what that might look like for balloters. But obviously we had to freeze and publish AU patient summary at a certain point in time. So we can only really base it on the agreed changes at the time. Are there any questions about, I guess, those two snapshots and what that process is, or anything people need to know in order to go use them or review them? All right, let's move on to timeframes. So in terms of the AU Core Ballot for Working Standard, ballot sign-up is now closed. So that is the period of time in which the consensus body for the standard forms, that's a HL7AU membership, and that finished on Sunday, I think, last Sunday. In total now, there are 61 voters registered. That number might shift a little bit over the next week or so. Just checking on the line, Brett, as the HL7AU representative. Have you finished the membership reconciliation, or is that still an ongoing process?
It is now finished, and it is 61 still.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, the membership or the ballot sign up form doesn't actually necessarily restrict, doesn't apply membership rules at the time of sign up. So there's a reconciliation process in the background from HL7AU to confirm eligibility and also numbers in order to do that. So no, that's great. Okay, so there are 61 people who are going to be voting for the AU Core Ballot for Working Standard. Of that, 10 are individual members. 51 are representatives of an organisation. For example, I'm one, I'm representing CSIRO. The number of unique organisations is, I think, 14, though I'll double check that with HL7 Australia later. And get the final numbers on that and report back. So that's our voting pool on the work we've done on AU Core R2. The ballot period, where the people who are registered to vote will assess whether or not they are comfortable with our proposed working standard, AU Core R2, proceeding to publication, is 4 weeks. So there's 4 weeks for them to consider, to vote, and to identify what feedback, if any, they're providing on that proposed working standard, and suggesting whether or not that should change, has to change, etc. Our reconciliation then, and that's really where we're going to be doing a lot of the work in the technical design group, sort of officially starts on the 8th of September. But in reality, we will start that in our next fortnight. So our next meeting, we will be looking at the early submission of the AU Core feedback and making some decisions in this technical design group on how we want to approach that. The target for publication for AU Core is and always has been January. That seems like a really big gap, I think, between the end of October and January. And there's 3 factors playing into that. And in fact, before I go into that detail, I probably just want to pause here and go, this is probably a bit more of an informative session. So if people have any questions along the way, please put your hand up. We can go into any more detail on any of these items, or if we don't know the answer now, we can go follow that up and bring it back to the next meeting. Part of the session, or the intention today, is that the technical design group members feel comfortable that they understand what's happening in Ballot and how that they can interact, and when and how does your input drive what happens with the standard. So I'll come back to publication timeframe. So there's 3 main reasons why publication's in January. One of them is that AU Core is downstream of AU Base. So we depend on AU Base to be finished all its Ballot before we can publish. They have signaled that they will publish by the end of January. So we know that we can publish by the end of January then. They may be earlier. And we also might be earlier if all of our prerequisites feeding into when we actually publish are done. We will just publish. We don't have to stick to January if we're finished. The second reason, of course, is AU Core itself. We will need to see the scope and the nature of the feedback that comes through and how long it takes us to work through that. And also whether or not we think it's really important that we test that out at the next opportunity. And by next opportunity, I mean the opportunity to test the ballot resolutions. In terms of this ballot period that's going to open really soon, there's a connectathon on the 1st to 2nd of September. So we'll actually be able to test out what's currently out for ballot, the proposed working standard. So that's going to give us a good kind of baseline to go, is this really working or not? But if we make any particularly normative changes, it's sort of a question for our group on, do we need to take advantage of the December connectathon to really confirm that those changes are appropriate? And if we do, given the January shutdown and the December shutdown for a lot of organisations, that means that we'll probably end up publishing in January, purely because there's some administrative overhead of going, yeah, no, we're done now, and then submitting approval forms to publish. So that's the second reason. The third reason that we're likely to publish in January is there are 2 downstream projects. There's AU requesting, and there is AU patient summary. And both of those use, to a greater or lesser degree, AU Core. E-requesting, for example, references off to like patients, practitioners, organisations are all controlled by AU Core at the moment. An AU patient summary is intended to be completely conformant to AU Core. So any ballot issues arising from e-requesting will be fed back to us to need to consider. And so we're giving a bit of leeway here to really give the downstream projects time to work through their issues and for us to work with them if we need to. Does that make sense? All right, I saw a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, so let's do a patient summary then. So for a whole number of similar reasons, same time frame ish. As in, ballot sign up is finished. The ballot period is going to be open for the same period of time. Ballot reconciliation, we're aiming for the same kind of time frame. And that, again, is because we need to feed into base and we need to feed into core the things that we need them changed. The other reason is because IPS 200 wants to publish, and it wants to publish soon. And we have a whole number of feedback that is being driven from AU patient summary into IPS 200 that we need to make sure is aligned. And then ideally, we are complete with a ballot resolution snapshot. This is ballot for comment. So it's the early milestone rather than the standards publication milestone, which means its target is to have gone through a wider community feedback and then have some kind of new release available to test out the new decisions we've made in the December Connectathon. So that's kind of its approach for patient summary. The voters are a little bit different. There's 59 instead of 61, still 14 organisations. So the difference is really in organisation membership, I think. All right, any questions about those overall timeframes?
Just one question about futures. So this ballot for comment for patient summary, and given we're looking at, I think it's the end of, is it June next year? We're maybe looking to get that done. So there'll be another ballot, the final ballot sometime, I don't know, maybe April or thereabouts next year. Earlier?
Yeah, it'll be March. I think beginning of March, end of February will be the ballot for working standard.
Okay. Thanks.
No worries. Okay, so now I'm going to go into some logistics. I'm going to be covering a lot of the material I did last time. So for those of you who sat through me talking about this almost exactly this day, it was the 8th of August last year. You can drop off the line if you want. But especially for those who haven't gone through ballot before, I think this is going to be quite informative. And also, please ask questions as I go through if there's anything that you're unfamiliar with. So it's going to be a bit ballot 101. I am going to try to keep it focused on AU Core because that's largely what we do in these calls. So first off, let's just set the governance scene. There are a whole bunch of rules around balloting because balloting is a formal process. It's a formal process. It's from HL7 International as a standards development organization. And in particular, although it is one of the ways that we go out and we get comments, it is the way in which we have formal approval to publish standards to different degrees, whether they are working standards or normative standards. Balloting is that formal process and mechanism that allows it. And there's a whole bunch of rules in many documents that govern it. I'm going to talk about 4 here. 4 that are really worth calling out. So there's a HL7 International, governance and operations manual. And it's got really all the kind of high level content, including what kind of ballots could be there, how do you form work groups, how does it all work, detailed in it. If you're interested, have a look. It has all those governance rules. We adopt that and we adapt it in Australia through a number of documents, both the HL7 Australia process documents and things like our local affiliate agreement. Relevant to this is that there's a process, a HL7 AU balloting process. There's also our decision-making practices document, which does make some call outs to ballot. We use it all the time. We just used it to approve minutes. And we use it in every meeting, and it still applies all throughout ballot. There's also the bylaws. So the HL7 Australia bylaws call out who's eligible to be a voter in ballot. I'm also going to just note here, there's going to be a HL7 AU ballot seminar for voters That should be Friday, the 15th of August at 10 a.m. It's in the HL7 calendar. But yeah, if you're a voter, it's a good idea to come along to that. I think it'll be recorded anyway. Is that right, Brett?
Yeah, we will record it and we'll also send out a direct message to all the people signed up about the
Awesome.
details. Yeah.
There's also like a couple of 5-minute like YouTube's how-tos that are linked off some of the pages. If you're going, how do I actually do this one specific thing? I think there's like screenshots and a whole workflow process that are walked through. So let's talk about AU Core though. So ballot for working standard. Now I've used that term a lot. I'm going to differentiate that from a few things. For comment. So for comment is, I think, really the lowest level of ballot. That's really where a project is early in its life cycle. It's got an indicative baseline. It wants to go out for wide comment to get some direction on the project on where does it need to go. You typically go out and really actually expect some truly significant changes in between that baseline and when you say, no, I'm done. We've worked on together a working standard. We're happy with this. We're putting it forwards, which is what the ballot for working standard is. Informative is different. We've not really done that in HL7 Australia, but informative would be more associated with things like how the Standards Australia has maybe some handbooks that are put out. It's a formally community recognised set of material, but it's not expected to be binding or normative. So it's a set of informative material to base content on. Then we have working standard. And it's really crucial. It's part of the FIRE process and community that we do this before we move to normative. And we do this many years before we move to normative, because part of the key point here is that we are proposing a working standard, and working is about working through the community. So we're proposing here a draft standard, and we're saying, let's evaluate this content. We think this is ready to implement, but it hasn't had significant implementation. We don't have the degree of confidence that we want to lock this down yet and say, no, we can't change it because we know it's completely right. So we want to work through this. And that's one of the intentions of a ballot for working standard. The other reasons that you would do this is we do expect it to eventually be binding. And by eventually binding, that in some form, whether that's government procurement guidelines, some other form of legislation or national conformance scheme, or tied to things like Medicare funding, there's an expectation, and the government has signalled that this will be coming in some form at some point, whether that's AU Core directly or whether it's AU Core via one of the downstream projects, be that e-requesting, patient summary, or some third project. So it's quite critical that we are evaluating this, because we understand that this will eventually be something that real world implementation systems actually have to implement and meet. And so that comes into a formal level of review where we have a whole set of constraints imposed from HL7 International down to us, with forming a consensus body, which we just did through the ballot sign up and membership, who will evaluate this and vote on whether or not we can publish this as a working standard. They essentially authorize the publication of this. Any questions or comments? All right. Let's go on to AU Core R2 more specifically. So in this case, we've already published the first release. That's always a lot harder to do, because a lot of the focus is around what actually makes an MVP, an viable product that you can form a baseline on that will actually function. In terms of the following on releases, the ballot is around the changes. So what we are really balloting is the changes between R1 and R2. We walked through the scope in detail last call, and that's really around our 3 new profiles. We did more mappings into AU CDI. We've done a number of enhancements into the profiles, little individual kind of change requests here and there. There's a full list of changes in the changelog, but this is really the content that is being balloted on. And what that means is that when the consensus body is reviewing this, what they're really reviewing, they're not resubjecting AU Core R1 to a can we publish. They're looking at, is the set of content in this new release appropriate for release as a working standard? It's not a review for development. We're not looking for a massive set of changes. We're looking to understand, is this appropriate enough to publish, and what, if anything, needs to change in order to release this as a working standard? That being said, we often get, as people look at this, new ideas, things that people really want that weren't in the scope of R2, like we haven't solved them yet, and we need a new release to do them. And that's fine. Anyone at any time, people on the call, whether you're a balloter or not, can raise a new work item. Really, the only difference there that I'm calling out is for those of you who have signed up to Ballot. If it's a new work item and let's work on it in R3, then please don't vote on that for R2. It's just an administrative good practice. We will go through it. When we do prioritization for the next release, we always look at every single open or deferred ticket anyway. But there's an administrative burden to the technical design group members every time we include a JIRA ticket and have it be voted on. Every TDG member has to look at it. All right, I'm going to go through a bit on what does it look like when people vote, and what are they really voting on, and what does it really mean when people do all of these things. And I'm going to go through it because as our technical design group, we are going to get this feedback. And when we get this feedback, we need to understand what has been given to us by the consensus body so that we can work to resolve it. I'm just going to go through and try to explain that briefly now. There's, at minimum, everyone who's voting will vote overall. Overall, at the far IG is what I've been saying, is the content of this release approved to be published as working standard. So everyone will record that vote. There's 61 signed up for AU Core, 59 for AU Patient Summary. You can still have suggestions for change and still be affirmative on, yes, I'm happy for this to be published, assuming you address my feedback. Balloters can also vote on individual feedback, and in some cases, they're required to. When a balloter votes on individual feedback, so not just at an overall level, they're nominating the what has to change. And that's the signal to our group to go through and look at the feedback on what out of that R2 scope needs to be considered in terms of enhancements or corrections or other kinds of improvements, editorial or normative, to work through before we publish AU Core R2. And in more detail, here are the votes people can cast. The first one is no vote. That sounds a bit strange, but that's the default. So every voter gets created in JIRA and they start with a no vote, which means the voter has taken no action. They've not indicated some kind of action or opinion on the standard. We always get a percentage of those in every ballot that for whatever reason, someone who had signed up to the vote has been unable to cast a vote. That doesn't count towards quorum for ballot or whether or not we can publish. There are some rules and I'll go through it in a sec. The next one is abstain. So the voter has actually done something. At least they have changed the vote. And it usually means that they have reviewed some part of the standard, if not all of it. And for some reason, they don't feel that they can confirm whether or not they are happy for this to be approved to be published. Sometimes that's because they have only had the chance to do a partial review before running out of time. Sometimes it's because a person feels that they don't have enough information or just aren't comfortable in casting that vote. And then we get to the next two that we really care about in this group. These are the two that will drive whether or not we have the approval to publish, and they are affirmative and they are negative. Affirmative is that the balloter is comfortable with us proceeding to publish AU Core R2 and may or may not have some feedback that should be addressed. Negative is that they are not comfortable, they are blocking publication of the release, and in that case, they have to provide the what? They must provide one or more specific pieces of feedback that give us the direction on what that is. What is it about AU Core R2, those changes in the release, that have to change in order to publish? Sometimes people have got those wrong. There's a couple of furfies. I'll bring them up later. I've seen negative votes on missing commas before, and I would suggest that's not really a blocking issue. I think that falls into affirmative if you'd like to provide editorial guidance. But I keep talking about this pass or fail. So these are the requirements coming down from HL7 International. And depending on what you're trying to publish your specification as, and in our case, we're going working standard for AU Core, we must reach 60%. And that 60% is 60% of voters are affirmative. And again, we only count affirmative and negative, so no votes, abstentions don't count. And we need 60%. Now, there's a process that is allowed in balloting where people can cast their votes. And then obviously if someone votes negative, well, what happens next when that's actually been addressed? And it's called withdrawal. So the next step after this, go Marvin, you've got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that the percentage is based on the number of votes rather than the number of people that signed up.
Correct. It's based on the number of affirmative votes out of the people that vote affirmative and negative.
Thank you.
So I think it could get an absurd number. We've never run into the issue. But although, like for patient summary, 59 are eligible, I think, if only 10 voted, if 6 were affirmative, that would pass.
Yep, perfect.
And so then for those people who vote negative, and there are, and I really don't want to dissuade people from voting negative where you identify any significant design issues or things that really need to, in your opinion, are necessary corrections in order to fulfill the specification's purpose. We should know that, and that's why you mark them negative. And then we go through and we address that as a technical design group. The next step after that is contacting those balloters and saying, look, we've addressed this, and they have the option to withdraw their vote, which turns it to affirmative. And that can be how we go through a ballot cycle, depending on the level of change that needs to happen. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the kinds of feedback we're going to be going through in the next TDG calls. So there's 4 kinds of jury issues, and we get each of these in every ballot. I'll start from the bottom. They're grayed out because they don't have to come to a TDG call, but people raise them during ballot. So the bottom one is comments. They're exactly what it says. Things like great job on the specification. We do get those. We've had them on AU Core in the last couple of ballots, usually from international reviewers. We've actually had like IPA, International Patient Access, and US Core authors review our specifications, which is wonderful. And so we can get comments like that. So they don't need to come to the TDG beyond the fact that I will, or another co-chair will report those back in a call if we've had them, and then we just close them off. The next are questions. This is allowed, although from a development group perspective, so the people on this call, we actually prefer you to use Zulip. So there's the fire chat called Zulip that is the best and easiest way to get quick feedback. But if you do have a question, and for your purposes, it's better if it's formally documented in a JIRA ticket and that the response to that is formally documented. You can ask a question using JIRA, and that will be considered and responded to by the co-chairs. And it may come to the technical design group to consider the question so that we can formulate the answer and reply back to the person. But it's not really feeding back an affirmative or negative vote. So you can't negative vote a question. The next two are change requests and technical corrections. I want to stress a thing about a technical correction. This is about defects. This is where something is obviously wrong. Raise these at any times if you think something is wrong and needs to be fixed, whether it's normative or editorial or otherwise, and you want it changed. These always rise to the top of the priority list and are always fixed. Don't vote on them if you're a balloter. You don't need to. They will always be fixed as a matter of priority in the current release that is being undertaken. And also it breaks some of the ballot JIRA workflow. We've got some issues that we can't close that I think will permanently be forever open, which are technical corrections that got voted on in past ballots. So just don't vote on it if you spot one. So then we come to the real things. These are the things we're going to see. These are the changes that we need to consider. It's a change request. It can be an enhancement. It can be about a massive design choice. It can be a totally new work item. It can be about a new point of guidance. It can be something about security and privacy, or clinical safety, or about conformance, or search terms, or it can be really anything. This is I think something should change here. This is going to be where we get almost all of the content that comes to our TDG, and they can be both affirmative, like some of them can be voted on affirmative, some can be voted negative, and depending on how many people are voting, you also get issues that have some people have voted affirmative and others have voted negative. But these will be the ones that come through, and every single change request voted on in that period must be considered by this group and resolved. Resolve can be deferred to a later release, but we must come up with a disposition and vote and agree on it. Which I'm just going to call out for voters. There's a little bit of a guide here on when do you go affirmative, when are you negative, and this should be a guide for us on how do we interpret the community's expectations when they have voted affirmative versus when they've voted negative. When you're voting on feedback and you vote affirmative, you're still saying, I think this should change. It's typically on things like enhancements. If it's actually a significant problem, design choice, maybe something is mandatory and you're like, this will actually really cause problems in systems across Australia and needs to be optional, then yeah, I think that's a negative. But there really is a difference between the two. And I think it's a bit of I'm not really sure that the difference is quite understood by the voting community quite well yet, but I hope we get there, because that's very useful for us to understand the difference between the two when people are voting. So anyway, do's and don'ts, just, yeah. Any questions about affirmative, negative, or how some of that might work? All right. Next bit, but what do we actually do? That's a good question. So there's a few different roles, and I didn't have time to do a swim lane, so I'll just break it down into ballotters, co-chairs, TDG members, and HL7 Australia, which plays a role through all of this. So assuming like this opens on Monday next week, ballotters will be asked to start voting. And so the expectation is they review the specification, they cast a vote in JIRA. I think I was just going through the fact that we can vote on individual pieces of feedback. There's a furphy out there that you have to raise a piece of, like you have to raise the JIRA to vote on it. You don't. Anything open, a balloter can vote on. And because otherwise you just keep raising duplicates. So it's kind of important that ballotters both review the specification, but also look at the open list of feedback on AU Core and consider if any of those, in their opinion, should be addressed. They can vote on those. While all of that's happening, co-chairs, I think there's 7 of us now for AU Core TDG, do the administrative aspects. So we keep an eye on what's happening in the JIRAs. We go through and we look at what are the questions and the comments and the change requests, check if what's there is a technical correction, and start triaging those to bring them through to this technical design group. So ideally, we will have those in the next call. And we also try to ensure and coordinate that dispositions are proposed in JIRA. Dispositions are like a preliminary idea on how to address a comment. So someone might say, I think this should be optional instead of mandatory. And the co-chairs will try to work towards forming a proposal of, well, yes or no, or something different. And should be working with the people that raised that feedback, as well as the wider community, to bring forwards a position that the technical design group can consider. And so then the technical design group has a couple of roles here. One, work on resolutions and voting on dispositions and TDG calls, and asynchronously. So like development, there will probably be a whole number of things that will come out that will be proposals to consider. And there will be emails out and saying, this is what is the change proposal. Please review that and provide some feedback. That will come out quite significantly over the next couple of months. Every one of our TDG calls will be voting on some JIRA issues. There's an expectation that the TDG members have considered those before they come into the calls and have questions or feedback. And it's also for those TDG members who raised the feedback to assist on developing the proposals and the material so that we can actually work through to address that content that's being provided. And that's going to keep going until we finish resolution or reconciliation, actually. So once we do, and I don't know how many JIRA items we're actually going to get, the lowest number on AU Core, noting it was R1, it was 130 something, I think, that needed to be brought through the technical design group discussions. I'm expecting that to be less because AU Core R2 is a much smaller scope, but I don't think it will be trivial. But once we have worked through those, noting we also will need to work with the downstream specifications like patient summary and e-requesting, who will be providing feedback on where they think AU Core needs to change to support them. After all of that happens, at a certain point, we will let HL7 Australia know that we're done. We have made all the decisions of what, if any, changes are going to happen. And we say, you know, this is done. We have finished documenting all these community agreements. HL7 Australia will contact the voters to withdraw votes in JIRA. That's that bit I was talking about for people who had identified maybe significant design choices or things they thought really needed to change in order to publish. And HL7 Australia will say, this is done now. Please consider whether or not you accept the resolution. If they do, they will withdraw that vote, and that might turn their vote into an affirmative. It might be the difference between having the approval to publish or not. When all of that's happened, we do that confirmation. Do we have the consensus body's approval to publish AU Core R2? And if we do, we publish. And if we don't, well, we go out to ballot again. I don't actually expect that to happen, but it is the next pathway. Any questions about that? All right, I'll just go through a couple of the other bits real quickly, and we'll leave some of the detailed things to when we're actually working through the resolutions, and I'll bring them up at that particular point in time, which I think I'll actually leave that. Aha, this one's, I think, quite relevant to us to understand that things can move in and out of scope of what we need to consider. A whole number of issues every time that get raised aren't actually in scope of AU Core or AU patient summary for that matter. People may raise, and often do, raise change requests on things that are actually upstream from us. So maybe the fire specification, maybe it's THO, which is, by the way, the fire terminology. Maybe it's the fire extensions pack. We've certainly had ballot feedback before where someone was trying to provide some quite meaningful design feedback on one of the core fire extensions. But there's nothing we can do in the AU Core Technical Design Group to change that. That feedback has to be redirected to the source and who can control it. So that's one of the things we'll do. The co-chairs have to go through and check that, but issues raised might end up moving out of the AU Core ballot and being directed to where it needs to go, but they might come in. So again, our downstream specifications, e-requesting and patient summary may raise things on patients or practitioners or organizations or something else, and the source of the issue is AU Core. And so that might come to us then to consider, do we change that or not, and work with that group. Ideally, we get a firm handle on this really quickly. It's quite important that we get an idea of how big the scope is and how much the downstream or upstream is going to be affected pretty quickly. So I think by the time ballot voting closes, we want to have that assessment kind of done within a couple of weeks, which is an obligation on the co-chairs to kind of make sure that happens. Just going to skip past this. Yeah, we vote. We do some voting, dispositions. We'll get there. No, move on. Aha, ballot furfies. Just calling this out. I'm going to really identify this one up here, furfy. You can only vote on your own feedback because that's really relevant to us. These items are out for review, and if you have, for whatever reason, are interested in participating in the ballot and really contributing to it, and you have an issue that you think is really important, it needs to be addressed, then you can raise it because the balloters should be and will be considering every open issue. And they can vote on every open issue, whether they've raised it or you've raised it. So please go through and review. And if you think there is a change that needs to be made, please raise that. That will be considered by the balloting cohort. Just confirming, you don't need to vote negative for the feedback to be addressed. All feedback is addressed. We don't, in this technical design group, beyond understanding and importance to the community level, affirmative and negative aren't treated differently. They're both addressed in any particular release. And just don't vote on technical corrections, please. It breaks the JIRA workflow. Right. Last bit. There is a page. This is going to be Ballot Central. This will be maintained and updated. I'll put a link to this information session and all the votes that are coming up, and a way to see all the current ballot issues and their state will be linked. And so we'll get to see all of that, and you'll get to see all of the co-chairs triage in near real time, because nothing is hidden. This is an open standards exercise, and all that will start to be linked onto this page. I think it's just been popped into the chat. Okay, that's what I wanted to run through for Ballot. Did anyone have any questions about Ballot that I didn't cover?
How could there be anything left? You're so thorough.
Thank you. No worries. As we go through it, we can ask them when they come up. So what's next is our next meeting. And it's going to be the meeting before the Connectathon. So we'll talk a bit about testing scenarios and priorities, but I'm really expecting that to be, let's actually deal with the feedback that's coming through. I very much expect us to have feedback by that point and to be working through those JIRAs. So the next set of meeting minutes I send out will also include the list of feedback items for us to consider in this meeting. So watch out for it, basically. That's it for today. Any other comments or anything that people want to add to this before we finish?
From me, thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, folks. I'll see you next time, and we will work through the feedback.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you.
Thank you.